Welcome to the In Love with PMDD podcast. I am your host, Dr. Rose, your PMDD relationship psychotraumatologist, and I help you stop the monthly PMDD breakups. PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It is in approximately 1 in 5 women, and it makes you want to break up with your partner approximately 1 to 2 weeks before your period every single month. So as someone who has suffered with PMDD for over 18 years, I dedicated my doctorate practice to helping partners navigate those monthly PMDD breakups with everything from attachment styles, triggers, sensitivity to noise, sensitivity to touch, all of the things that you really struggle with when you're in PMDD. And I also dedicated my dissertation to a phenomenological study of the relationship experiences of partners of individuals who suffer with premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So I'm not just here to help the sufferer, the one who is suffering with PMDD. I am here for the partners as well. So if you need those private sessions, make sure you go to inlovewithpmdd.com and get those tools. So let's get into this week's PMDD trauma transformational tools that is going to help you stop the monthly breakups and stop the suffering and stress in your PMDD relationship. Let's get into it. Today, I am going to be giving you a behind the scenes of my doctoral journey to becoming a PMDD doctor. And I am finally finished, as I told you. If you're on my email list, you've gotten that already. If you're not, you need to DM me so that you can get on there. I send out weekly emails every single week, video. And I really want to go into the behind the scenes of my journey, because as I was finishing it up today for publication into the literature, I noticed that I wasn't sharing as much about the journey itself. And I don't know if some people listening thought that, oh, is she still doing it? Because I always get DMs. If you DM me on Instagram, I'm there every single day, 2 to 3 hours talking with PMDD partners, but 36,599 words, 150 pages, 186 references for my dissertation. That is what I just turned into my university's library to be completed and submitted and published in the literature. And this has been such a long time coming, I would say since 2017. And we are now in 2023. So please, all of you mathematicians, go ahead and do that. But, a lot of times when people ask, especially people in my cohort, actually, I have a calculator right here. Again, I'm a psychologist. I'm not a mathematician, but I got you. I have a golden calculator here for that reason. 6 years. So 6 years for my doctoral journey. So I want to give you a little bit of background. And I feel like when I started this podcast, it was approximately 2 years ago. I would say about 2021 is when I really started it. And I don't think that anyone knew really where I was on my journey when I started it, because I just literally started it to serve. I just immediately came in and started serving PMDD partners. And not a lot about me was disclosed except for my relationship. There's so much more to me and my PMDD journey outside of my relationship. And if you're in the Breakup Proof Academy, these are the individuals that are privy to that. They know who I am outside of PMDD, what's going on with my PMDD relationship, and then also my life. It's a lot of things. And I think my private clients too, because I've shared that over the years, because I travel a lot. And I think I want to address a lot of the misconceptions today. Like, I feel like as I'm closing this chapter of my journey, that I'm just in a place of revealing a lot of what happened. So many times when you're going through really traumatic experiences, you don't feel like you can talk about it when you're in the moment, but it's almost like when you're past it, then you feel like you're kind of in that place where you can share. And I felt led to do that literally tonight. It's really, really late here on the West Coast. I'm in California, and I was not scheduled to record, but I just got finished submitting my dissertation to the library for publication and all of the things. And as I'm closing out this journey, I'm like, wow, so much has happened. And I almost, like, part of me, there was a sense of regret. It's like, maybe I should have talked about the whole process, like, as I was going through it. But then also, I know me, if I would have talked about this process while I was going through it, it probably could have derailed me from actually finishing, because there's so many traumatic things that happen on my journey that could have discouraged me from even completing. And I think that was probably my worst fear. You know, my worst fear was that I was going to start this journey with getting my doctorate and something was going to happen and then I wasn't going to be able to finish. And lots of things happened. And I just almost can't believe when I'm looking back at it. You know, when my dissertation chair, my professor, who I've had since the beginning of writing my dissertation, you know, is now addressing me as Dr. Alcatan. And I'm just like, oh, it's normally like, hey, Rose, you need to do this. Hey, Rose, you need to do that. And then once I passed my dissertation defense, which was my oral presentation of defending everything, I'm now being addressed differently. And even at work. And I know for so many of you, you may think, oh, you have a job. Like, I actually do have a job. This is not my full-time profession, although it is because it's very consuming in the same way that my original job is. So it is kind of like split, you know, I'm splitting kind of like, you know, how we do with PMDD, where we feel like we're living double lives. That's how I feel. I'm doing double careers, but it's because I'm so close to retirement that I have to finish. Really? That's my dog. I have to finish strong. So Leo, sorry. So yeah, I'm just at a place where I'm ready to share, and I feel like I'm finally at a place where it is going to be beneficial. And I always want everything that I tell you, Leo, sorry, keeping it real over here. I always want everything that I tell you to be beneficial. You know, I want it to be valuable to you. I don't want it to just be me telling you about my life, but it actually doesn't provide any value to what you're going through with your PMDD. But I finally feel like I'm at a point where I have, you know, something to share about my journey that is actually going to be valuable to you. I am writing a book as well, but I was waiting to finish this process in order to write it. And it's such perfect timing, because it's ready to be poured out, because there's so much I went through, even up until doing my final, you know, oral defense, my final defense for my doctorate, where I had to do it. Like, there were so many scheduled, it was just so many things where I was just like, is this really going to happen, or am I just going to be on this journey forever? So I think this may be a 2-part series, because I'm looking at the time and I'm like, I don't know if I can explain this all in one episode unless you have time. And number one, I want to thank you. I'm going to cry. I want to thank you for listening every single week. I want to thank you for interacting with me on Instagram or via email. I want to thank you to every private client that I have had through this journey. I want to thank every participant that was on this dissertation study. When I immediately released that I was needing participants for my dissertation study, I had an overwhelming overflow of PMDD partners that were willing to support me and help me get this research out there, share their story, be open and vulnerable Some of them were private clients. Some of them were not private clients, but they came in from all over the country. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am for opening yourself up and telling me your PMDD story and your PMDD journey, because I saw myself and my PMDD partner in every participant that I interviewed for this doctoral journey. And I've watched the videos again and again and again, and I've listened to the audio again and again and again in so many different arenas. I've gone on walks and listened to things that you've gone through. I've been in the sauna. I've been stuck in this office cubicle listening, just really being able to get to the heart of what it is that you are going through. And I am so grateful for what you shared with me, for all of the participants. I cannot thank you enough. And so many times when you're on your doctoral journey, you worry about, are you going to get the right amount of participants? Are you going to get participants? You seek out to do this research study, but you don't know if people are going to want to volunteer. And this is why I have been on so many PMDD podcasts. And this is probably a way that a lot of the listeners here have found me, is me volunteering my time. Everyone that's reached out to me on Instagram, DM'd me from the beginning, and they've asked me to come and be a guest speaker on their podcast. I have gladly done it because I know what it's like to be in that position, to want to help others and just needing that extra assistance and wanting to add value. And so if you've heard me on another podcast, just know that I am here to support everyone in the PMDD community, to help you, right? To help PMDD partners. I am fully aware that there are so many resources out here for PMDD partners that have nothing to do with relationships. I don't disclose and say, oh, I'm only going to talk about, I'm only going to go on relationship podcasts, which there are not any, by the way. But I don't care if you're into holistic health. I don't care if you're into whatever it is that you do for your PMDD. I'm never knocking it. I'm always supporting you. I'm always here in your corner. And that's why I've been on those podcasts, to really just share tools for PMDD partners wherever you are. And in the beginning of my journey, I thought, okay, I didn't originally start my doctoral journey for PMDD. Let's rewind all the way to the beginning. Remember when I said, if you have time? Yeah, let's rewind to the beginning. So I have multiple degrees. I am very decorated as far as education is concerned. I'm what you call a lifetime learner. I believe in learning, and I've been that way since I was a little child. I'm a writer at heart. I write. I've noticed over the years, a lot of my writing has turned into speaking, hence the podcast and my private sessions and my, Instagram blogging. And it's just, everything is turned into speaking. But a lot of the things I write, in order to process, and I journal. But, yeah, so let's go through my educational journey, shall we? We'll start with that. So I have an associate's degree in paralegal, so pre-law. I am a paralegal, licensed paralegal. I was going to be a lawyer. And I know that's funny because what I'm doing is so much different from that, but that's actually how I got to my calling of doing counseling, is that I was in one of my litigation professor's classes, and one of our assignments was to go up there and kind of defend a case. It was a criminal case. I wanted to do family law, so that was kind of leaning into counseling. And what my professor told me after I had done my presentation and everything, it was like, you don't need to be a lawyer ever. And I was like, what? Because I was already deep in it. I was majoring in pre-law in my undergrad. And he said, you're more of a mediator. And I was like, what do you mean by that? I took this by offense because this is a litigation professor. This is someone that's really supposed to be cutthroat. If something happens with you, like they're supposed to be the ones that defend you. But he was like, you have the ability to see both sides. So it's kind of biased for you to be a litigation lawyer because you're not only seeing your client's side, you're seeing the other client's side. So you're more of what we would call a mediator, which is when you're trying to come to an agreement with something, we would bring you in a room with the mediator and, you would talk it out and come to an agreement that would be approved by the judge. And I said, yeah, that actually does sound, right up my alley. And so he was like, okay, great. So you'll finish out this class and then change your major. And I was like, what? Because everything within me was legal, law, all of the things. And so I was very, the job that I had, I was a paralegal, like I was licensed in this. I was a notary. I was doing all of the legal things. And he was pretty much like, yeah, no. And I had the ability to trust my professors, people that are in places that I want to be or I'm striving to be. I will trust them and shift the trajectory of my life because of the guidance that they give me, because I know that they're telling me this based off of mistakes that they've made in the past, and they don't want me to make the same mistakes. So I'm not so egocentric that I would say, no, this is the path that I'm going on. And I'm not so rigid that I'm like, this is the path I'm going on. I'm just going to finish it strong. And I'm not into that. If someone's telling me something that is beneficial for my journey and it makes me change, then I am all for that. And I've done that so often in my journey. I'm a Sagittarius. I'm an Enneagram 7. I'm a free spirit. I'm very flexible, very fluid in a sense of I like to go with what I believe that God is telling me to do, the universe, whatever you believe in. I don't believe in staying on a path that just because you originally started on it, you have to stick to it. So when my litigation professor told me that, I remember it was late at night because I was taking night classes because I worked as a paralegal during the day and I was taking this night class. It was the longest night class. It was like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I hated it. It was like Tuesdays and Thursdays. I hate it because it was like my day was, I knew on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I pretty much had no life because I would work all day until 5 p.m., 9 to 5. And then I would get off, try to get a little snack, and then be in the class from 6 to 9. And this was my way of expediting my degree. But when he told me that, I was looking at my credits and I was looking at everything. So I have a lot of, college credits at the time that didn't necessarily transfer to what I'm doing present day. So after that, I finished because, I finished my paralegal degree. I was like, well, I'll just get my associates, that'll be fine. Because that would be beneficial for the job that I had. And then I moved on to something that I thought was better suited, and that was human resources. So then I got Nope, I finished my bachelor's in paralegal. Yeah, I went all the way through. I was that far. Yeah, I was that far in my paralegal journey that pretty much I went to the registrar's office and they're like, you only need this many more classes to finish your bachelor's. So if you really want to switch, like maybe do it for your master's. And I'm like, good talk. So I finished my bachelor's in pre-law paralegal studies. And I went on to my master's. When I went into my master's, I was like, let me do human resources because that was something that was more personable. It still involved the legal aspects because as you know, with HR, you have to be, up to date on all the things that are legal. So I stayed with that. And I got my master's. I got my master's in human resources management at the time. So, and I was a human resources director for my job. HR was my thing. I love people. So it kind of suited me very well. We'll go to my career in a minute. But then I was like, I wanted to learn more. I was doing a lot of classes. Like I loved elective classes because it allowed the freedom of choosing classes that you didn't like. It didn't matter what you choose. You could choose badminton, you could choose art, you could choose whatever. And I really got into life coaching. And I took this one life coaching class and fell in love. I was like, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do. I want a life coach. I'm already a certified personal trainer. I do that as well. So I'll get into my career. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. It fits my personality. I love motivating, inspiring people, all of the things. And so after I was taking that elective, I got really into mindfulness and yoga and like all of these things, and emotional intelligence, which I fell in love with. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to be a coach. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a life coach. And it was so broad because this is just at the time where life coaches were becoming a thing. It was becoming not just a hobby thing, but there was actually, the industry was, booming with people that are wanting to be coaches. So in anything that I do, I always hire a professional who has been where I have been, has done what I have done, and are very successful at what they're doing. I always have a coach. I have a coach for multiple areas of my life. So when I tell you about reaching out to services for me, I'm not telling you to do something that I don't already do. Present day, I can let you know right now, I have a conditioning coach for cardio. I have a strength training coach. I have a business mentor coach. I have, I don't have a marital coach anymore, but at one point I did. We had a marriage counselor, but again, you'll get into this, or when I tell you a little bit later on about my journey, but I had a marriage coach, not a counselor, a coach, because I'm really into practical steps. I'm a very self-aware person. I can pretty much go to a professional and tell you where I am, but I'd like to get the actionable steps. So that's why I implement that into my practice right now. For all of my private clients, know that I'm always giving tools. I talk to you about tools all the time because I'm not just going to, listen to how you feel and then that's it, because there's no transformation in that. And I'm all about transformation. So at one point I had a marital coach in the beginning. And then when I realized a lot of what I was going through was due to PMDD, I was like, oh, well, this person doesn't know anything about it. I guess I'll just have to go on my journey of creating it. And that's what I did. But so getting into my doctorate degree, started back in 2017. Yeah, 2017. A lot was going on in my life, but I knew that I wanted to continue my educational journey. So I enrolled and I said, I'm going to do it in counseling. And I was going to do my doctorate in counseling with a concentration in traumatology, which is ultimately what I got my doctorate in. Now, at the time, as you're getting your core courses done, by the way, this doctorate degree was meant to take 5 years. It took me 6 years. It felt like 10 years. But it's kind of like get comfy. It's not like your regular degree. Your bachelor's is kind of long. It's like 4 years. Then my master's took me 2 years. And then you get into your doctoral journey and you just are kind of, you're not going anywhere fast. So you might as well get really comfortable in this journey, because it's an exploratory journey. You're becoming a researcher. You're learning all of these skills that you need to practice. You're getting those practicum hours. You're having those private times with your professor and really, honing in on your skills. So it is a journey that you're not meant to rush. And so I started to do life outside of that. What I mean by that is I started to accept, having private sessions with clients that are really related to all of the research that I had done. So I had started in 2017. I really didn't fully begin taking full on private clients, I would say, until about 2020, because I was what do you call it? I was in my research phase the first couple of years because I switched from childhood trauma. So that's what I want to tell you. When you first get your doctorate, you have to talk to your professor and stuff like that after you do your core courses. And then you decide what it is that you're going to have as your dissertation practice. What are you going to specialize in? And I 100% intended to practice in childhood trauma the whole time. Like it wasn't until 2020, late 2020, like around Christmas time. Cause I can remember I literally, if you look on the podcast, like the picture where you see me crying in black and white, that is from 2020, late 2020, Christmas of 2020. I'll give you the background on that photo of where I was, what I was doing. But that's when I took a turn towards PMDD, whether I wanted to or not. So I was doing childhood trauma because, as I've spoke about on prior episodes, I have so much childhood trauma. And there's this part of your dissertation where it's called significance of the study, the role of the researcher. Like, why did you choose this? And I had a plethora of information to say why I was going to choose to do it on childhood trauma, because I was a product of childhood trauma. I was placed in foster care at the age of 3 by my parents, my biological parents. One was addicted to both were addicted to drugs. One was in jail for murder. Both were, my mom, who was not incarcerated, would just, leave us, me and my biological brother, just places to go out on her little binges or episodes with drugs. And I remember even as little as like 3, like growing up, and like my older brother, which was not that bigger than me, taking my hand and walking me around to knock on neighbors' doors, to ask for bread, to ask for food, because we were hungry, because we were left with no food. And so I got placed into foster care. I went into foster care and I was there for a couple of years, and I ended up getting adopted. Within that adoption, I was verbally and physically abused from the age of, I would say, when I got there. So I was there at 3, I got adopted at 5, and then it lasted till I was 17. So I spent my life surrounded by childhood trauma and abuse and wanting to escape, but being a child and could not escape. I didn't have any, although I was in contact with my biological parents. One was incarcerated, my dad, and we wrote letters and things like that. And then with my mom, she had pretty much started her own life and was doing her own thing, but she called me, she soothed that kind of guilty conscience kind of thing. We would visit from time to time, but there was never that really secure connection because we just seemed so different. And I remember as a child really looking at my parents and being like, why don't I relate to either one of them? I thought that was the weirdest thing, because I was growing up in a home where I was adopted by a family who had 3 biological children who lived with me. And I could see how they were so much like their parents. And I was like, how come I don't feel like I'm like, my mom or dad? Like I felt very lonely, very isolated as a child. A couple of years into my adoption, my biological brother ran away because he wanted to find my mom. You know how if you have children that are a little bit older, he was like 12. So he still remembered having that relationship with, my mom. And he was always like trying to get back to her. Like, I want to be with my mom. I want to be with my mom. Where I was kind of younger. So I was in that stage of, I wanted security. I wanted comfort. I wanted food, I wanted shelter. Those were the things that were important to me. So I was very happy to stay. When the social worker pulled me into a room at the age of 5 and said, do you want to stay here? Do you want to be adopted? And of course, I didn't know what that meant, but she said, do you want to make this your home? Do you want this to be your mommy and daddy? And all these things. And I said, yes. And I said, yes, on the premise that I had security meaning a roof over my head. I had my own room at the time. I had food on the table. So everything was yes, yes, yes. So fast forward, they asked my brother the same thing and he was like, no. And that's when he ran away and left me. And we haven't been in contact since. And that was traumatic. That was like one of the many traumatic experiences that I've had because, my brother was the one that was with me every single time my mother would leave. And, I didn't know any family outside of him that I had been with on this foster care journey. And he just left. And I remember crying because he left at a time that I was at my biological aunt's house. And I just kept thinking, why didn't he take me with him? Why didn't he take me with him? Why did he leave me here? And I was so hurt that I was left by yet another family member. So that's when my self-esteem started to take a hit because I started to believe that there was something wrong with me. Like I really believed that there was something wrong with me. Why does everybody who's supposed to be my family keep leaving? And so as I began to get verbally and physically abused within my adopted home, it was reaffirming my insecurity. It was reaffirming that there was something wrong with me because how did, I'm like at this point, I have two parents that abandoned me. Now I have these adopted, parents and they're abusing me. So I was in another position of really feeling like there's something wrong with me because I was a common denominator. And I had learned that as an early age. Every single time there were birthdays and things, I would always be on punishment. So they would find a way to never celebrate a birthday or Christmas. I was like the black sheep of the family. I was told that I needed to be grateful that they even took me in, that being an addict was hereditary and that I was going to end up being on drugs and out in the streets. And all of these things that were programmed in my mind at an early age really messed me up mentally as far as my self-worth. I became very insecure, very quiet in a sense of I learned how to bury my trauma. My memory started to suffer because I would have these moments of forgetting certain things, but it was because my way of not holding grudges to my family, my biological family or my adopted family was a complete like washout. I would just forget it so that I could move on because I've always felt that I had so much love to give and I just wanted someone to love me back. And I felt like if I held on to everything that they had done, then I would end up with nobody. So I needed to wash that away so that I could love them, so that they could love me back. And I felt like I was on this endless journey of finding love and never really feeling loved. And so as that translated into my relationships, I wasn't, so I ended up being in the home. And when I write the book, I'll kind of talk about how I left the home, but it was, again, very traumatic. It wasn't like a nice leaving the home. I was basically kicked out at 17 years old and told, you're on your own. We only kept you this long. I found out a couple months into my 17th year that they were getting paid to take care of me. So because I was a ward of the state before, that they were getting monthly payments for me, whereas they were making it seem like they were doing all of these things out of the kindness of their heart and I owed them so much. The money that, they were getting from me, they were using to supplement for not only their kids, but other, foster kids and stuff like that. So it was a very messed up situation that I was being told. And at that point, my biological mom had moved on and remarried, and she was living her own separate life. And, my biological dad had gotten out of prison, and all of those years of saying, as soon as I get out, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. As soon as he got out, he went to do his own thing. And the basis of that was drugs. And I was forgotten about. He didn't reach out to me. So in high school, I ran track and field. I got a scholarship to North Carolina A&T University. Shout out to the Aggies. And the problem is my birthday is in November, but I was in private school, so I was allowed to go to school technically a year early. And the scholarship included room, all of my full tuition, but not room and board. So I needed to take out a student loan. I wasn't legal to take us out a student loan. So I went to after I got kicked out, I'm like, okay, well, they were like, you have to have your parents co-sign for you. So I asked, my parents, like, hey, will you co-sign on this loan? Like, I got this scholarship. All you have to do is co-sign just for my room and board. And my dad told me, basically, I'm not doing anything for you. Like, I don't care if you're out on the street. I don't care if you die tomorrow, pretty much. And I was like, again, traumatic. So I was out on my own. I didn't know what to do. I was staying with my aunt at the time, but I knew that it was temporary because I was basically told, like, you just have a couple of months. It was towards my senior year. So they, took me in while I went to prom and like all those things. But at the end of the day, I had to figure out something to do, and I didn't have any family support. So I ended up going to a recruiter, and I joined the military at the age of 17. You had to have parental consent. That was the only thing that was given for me to go. And I joined at 17. And I am now, I can tell you guys, because my birthday is in November. I'll be 38 years old. So if you count that up, I have now been in the military for 20 years. I have been in the United States Army for 20 years this year. Actually, August 15th is my anniversary of my 15th of my 20th year. And I can't believe I'm saying that because so much has happened since then. But throughout my whole career, throughout everything that I've been doing, even up to this day, throughout my whole educational journey, I've been in the military. That's been my job. Before I joined the military, like those couple months, that summer that I was living in Washington, D.C., in the U.S., I worked for NASDAQ. And I was, that's the company with the, why can't I remember what that's called? The stock market. So I was doing international trading. I ended up getting that job because I went to the interview. They didn't ask how old I was, and I got hired, and I worked the whole summer, and I loved it. But I was literally the youngest one that worked there. But yeah, so I went to Clark Atlanta University for my undergrad, and I joined the military, and I was literally doing both. I was going to school and working. So I was working with the military during the day, and then I would go to classes as I was permitted, sometimes night classes, all the things. And I was just on my own, living my own practical life. And I tried so many times to have a relationship with my mom and my dad. I think it wasn't until my late 20s, which is pretty, I was like, this is pretty sad. But like my late 20s is when I finally kind of gave up, because I spent the bulk of my 20s trying to, again, earn my parents' love. I was consistently going through childhood trauma. I was consistently let down. I was consistently manipulated. I consistently put myself in situations that I accepted treatment that was less than what I deserved. But it was because I literally felt like if I don't accept what little crumbs that they're giving me, I'm going to have nothing. Because you have to think, I wasn't close with any other family members. I was literally like an orphan outside of them. And it wasn't until my adopted mom said to me one day, and I strongly believe she has PMDD, by the way. Like when I think back on my life, I'm like, had I known about PMDD, I'm like 110% sure she had it, because that's what kept me in that traumatic experience with her, because she would be so cruel, but then she would be so sweet and nice. And now looking back on it, I'm like, oh, wow. So the nice part was her. But when she was, in that PMDD state, like it didn't matter that I was her daughter. I was treated not like a daughter. And so it was very weird for me looking back on that, because I look at my daughter and I'm like, even though I have PMDD, like I don't cross that line. That maternal instinct is still there. I, could be going through the worst of the worst, but I still am able to reel it in even more so than I can for my partner. So I don't know if it's because she didn't physically raise me, so that bond was never really there, but just the things that she's been able to say and do to continue on with the childhood trauma was very shocking to me, because, you know, it wasn't until I became a mother, I'm like, how could you? You know, because in my mind, I kept thinking, well, you've put me through all of these things. I've gone through foster care. I've been through, you know, years of abuse, you know, in my adopted home. And in my mind, I really believed that she owed me. She owed me a relationship. She owed me a repair. And I was leaving the door open. I never brought up the past. I never brought up anything. My biological brother would always guilt trip her and be like, oh, I'm not anything. I'm not doing anything with my life because of how you raised me, what you did with me. You left us. And she would feel really guilty and start to give him everything. But she didn't really give me anything, because she always said, oh, you're okay. Like, you got it. Like, because I always landed on my feet, you know, as you would say. And so she just never had that maternal instinct for me. It was very weird. And so it wasn't until we had a disagreement, and we had him before, where we wouldn't talk for a while, and then we would end up talking because she would just say something like, I miss you. It was almost like she was an ex, because she would say stuff like, I miss you. And then I would fall for it every time and go back. And then I would go back in that circle, and she would hurt me again. And then she would say, I miss you. Don't you? And then she would say, like, don't you miss me? So it was very manipulative. I'm not going to use the N word, you know, the narcissist. I'm not going to use that with her, but wink, wink. Anyway. So, yeah. So one day she was, and I was talking to her, and I was literally, I think I just went off, and I never did that. I always had the utmost respect for her, but I'm like, you have caused me so much pain in my life that I didn't even ask for. And all I asked you to do was this. And I think I asked her something small. And then she was like, I don't owe you anything. And I think that was the turning point, because I realized, my goodness, she really believes she doesn't owe me anything. I always felt like she knew, and like that was a thing, but she literally said she didn't owe me anything. And so in my mind, I'm like, if you don't owe me anything, even as showing up as my mother as an adult because you weren't there when I was a child, then this is never going to go anywhere, because we're not seeing my life the same way. You know, she's moving on as if nothing happened, and I'm still looking for redemption. So I had to get my healing outside of her. And so that's when we became estranged. At first, I didn't know that was a thing, but I was talking to a counselor, because I did go through counseling for my childhood trauma. And they were like, how long has it been since you've been estranged? And I'm like, am I though? But I'm like, yeah, I guess that is it. And I had to do that for my own mental health. I was, especially, you know, when PMDD showed its head after. So my daughter's 14. And I believe I got PMDD like right after I had her, like, or even right. I would say it was borderline a little bit before her, but definitely when I had her. And it just made those times when I was going through my childhood trauma so much worse, because I would have these big PMDD rage moments where I would feel so angry. But I was also just genuinely not an aggressive person. So it's very weird. Even as a child, I was like that. My aunt would tell me, my biological aunt would say, you weren't really like lash out. You wouldn't yell. You wouldn't be naughty. But when you would get really mad, she was like, we would always notice, because you would break pencils. Like, I would just sit there and I would just feel so much anger, you know, as a child, and break pencils, because because I have such a heart for people. I'm such an empathetic that I had the constraint to not want to hurt anyone's feelings, even though I knew that they hurt me and I was really mad. So I think I developed that self-control really, really early, because if I did anything to anyone else, I could literally feel the pain that I would be causing them. So I would stop myself from doing it. And I learned that at an early age. And so, Yeah, so I've been in the military for 20 years. That's where I met my current PMDD partner. We met in Hawaii. He's in the Marine Corps. Obviously, I've talked to you about that before, and I'm in the Army, and we met just like while he was on leave. And it was a moment where I had gone through a divorce in the past and had spent 10 years single because I didn't want to bring, another man into my daughter's life. I just said, I guess I was like, and I used to always say to her, I guess it's going to be me and you, kid. And it wasn't until 10 years later when I met my PMDD partner that I felt safe enough to even open myself up. And I had dated in between, but never brought them around, my daughter kind of thing. So when I would have those breakups, it would just be like, oh, we broke up. And, I would automatically, I didn't associate, even knowing that PMDD was there, I didn't associate the breakups until later on. So when I was going through my dissertation, fast forward, so we can get to why I'm telling you all this. I was going through the dissertation and I was wanting to talk about all of the childhood trauma, specifically what was going on with my mom. And so a bit of my current dissertation is in there on the attachment theory, because I wanted to talk about, I really just didn't understand how my mom didn't feel maternal and attached to me like the way that I did my daughter. It was like, what, do some people not have that? Like, what's going on? I really was interested in researching that. And so my original dissertation topic was how childhood trauma impacts intimate relationships. So I wanted to talk about how your attachment with your parents impacted the way you show up in your intimate relationship. Now that I'm a doctor, I'm probably still going to do that. And that's what my dissertation, it wasn't my dissertation chair. It was one of my professors had told me, once you become a doctor, you can write articles on whatever you want. So I want your dissertation to be on what is a gap in the research, what is missing, what is the community you want to serve, all of these things. So I'm like, you know what? I switched it. I said, I'm going to take away the childhood trauma aspect of it. I'm going to stay with relationships because I was very interested and intrigued with the adult attachment theory, which is by John Bowlby, which is in my one of the theories that I address within my dissertation. I was very into that. But when I added PMDD into it, the hard part was the lack of prior research. And I've talked about this a couple of times on other podcasts, but if you've not listened, when I was going to do my dissertation on childhood trauma, there's so much research on it. It was a no-brainer. I was practically almost done with my dissertation. So basically, I could have had my doctorate. We're in 2023. I could have had it in 2021 because everything was there. And when I said that I wanted to switch it, which was in 2021, they said, well, then everything that you have that is related to childhood trauma, you're like, pretty much you can't use it because it doesn't apply. And then also PMDD was not well known in the literature. So you need to base your dissertation on prior research. So they're like, it's going to take you longer because you're either going to have to wait until more people start putting things in the research that are actual doctors and researchers, or your research study is not going to be able to be done because you have to put the basis of your related literature on things that have been proven already, and you're building off of that. And then you can talk about the gap in the research. And I was like, so they were like, are you sure you want to do this? But I felt this call to do it because I was helping a PMDD sufferer. And then I was in the community one day, just like, in there talking about my own struggles. And one of the PMDD partners had passed away. She had taken her life, and that was enough conviction for me. I was like, oh no, like this is a thing. The fact that people don't know that this is a thing, I can't, I can't sleep knowing that this is not out there, that there's not resources, that there's not help. Like I became so solidified in that. And I had a business coach at the time for running my business. My business was not called In Love with PMDD. It was called Rose Resolutions. And it was basically my first name. No. It was called Rose Foundational Freedom. That's what it was called. Because I believed in freedom. I wanted you to be free in your relationships. I wanted to get to the core of it. That's what my company was called. When that happened, I switched the name of my company to In Love with PMDD because I said that I am solely going to commit my services and my doctorate to PMDD partners. And it was one of the biggest decisions that I've ever made in my life, financially, mentally, physically, with my relationship. Like everything changed for me when I made that commitment. But I remember my business mentor asking me, "Are you sure?" And I said, yes, this is my community. This is my people. Now, at the time, I was not even known in the PMDD community. I was a nobody, right? I was not known at all because I had not been saying anything specifically about PMDD. I knew that I had PMDD, but I was talking about relationships as a whole. I was talking about motivation as a whole, inspiring as a whole. I was talking about fitness. I was talking about all of these things, but I wasn't honing in on PMDD relationships. And there was no one that was doing that. And so again, I was faced with another person, my business mentor, who was again saying, "Are you sure?" My dissertation, all of the professors were saying, "Are you sure?" Because everyone knew that this was going to take time, money, effort, energy, grit. You have the disorder. So we know that you're going through stuff kind of thing. And back to the picture that you see on the podcast cover, I was deployed overseas. And that year, I was deployed for a year. And I was in a tent, in a hut. And I know you can't see the background of it. I was isolated because of COVID. Because you couldn't be around other people, you had to quarantine. And I was isolated. You couldn't talk to anybody. And I was going through a really bad PMDD episode. I had just left our daughter with, my husband, and I was going through it. PMDD, depression, all of the symptoms, I would say all of them. And I was literally in this tent screaming, crying, snot running everywhere. You could probably see it in the picture. I felt like I was going to lose my mind. And I looked around me and there was absolutely nothing. I was in a tent in the middle of nowhere on this deployment. And no one knew that I had PMDD. No one knew that. I was in this tent and I was crying, and I was quarantined for 14 days. And it just happened to be that my luteal phase, the phase of my cycle that I was deep in PMDD, was directly aligned with that. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I literally felt like that. I didn't have anything with me but water. And they would bring us food. But I felt so low. I felt so out of control. I felt so sorry for myself. I was like, why do I have this? What did I do to anyone to allow me to have this? What did I do? How can I undo it? Why is this happening to me? I felt like I had gone through all of this trauma in my childhood. Why does my life, my adult life, have to suffer just as much as my childhood did? I couldn't believe that I had spent a childhood of being abused, and I was about to spend an adulthood of me abusing myself. I was like, I'm me and my partner were going through it. We were really going through it, and it was not a good time for me to go on this deployment. But of course, I'm in the military. What am I going to do? I felt so alone, so scared. And I remember calling my PMDD partner, and I remember the message that I left. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this one. I felt like I was so deep in the hole. It was almost like the hole that I had envisioned being in. When I was in PMDD, I was physically sitting in it. It was literally a dark tent, nothing in it. And it was just me and my PMDD. And he was trying to encourage me the best way he could. It's going to be okay. You know, we love you, all of these things. And I was just like, no, not this time. I'm not going to be able to dig myself out of it this time. Like, this is it. And I felt that. And, you know, I there's no way that I could do anything else with my profession, my doctorate, my whatever, other than serving PMDD partners because of that moment. Because I felt what that felt like, I imagined this is what every PMDD partner, when I say PMDD partner, I mean anyone that has PMDD that is in an intimate relationship. I know there's a lot of questions. You're like, are you talking about my partner? No, if you are the female, the woman, they, whatever you want to call yourself, if you are the person that is suffering with PMDD, or if you are the partner, both of you are PMDD partners. So I don't want you to get confused with that. But when I was in that tent, I knew this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because I know exactly how they're feeling, whether I want to or not. I know exactly the thoughts that are going through your head. I know exactly the image that you have of your relationship with your kids. Like, I have the aspect of your relationship with your partner, the relationship with your kids, the relationship with yourself. And a lot of my private clients have said that. They said, you know, it's so refreshing to talk to someone that actually I don't have to overly explain what I'm going through. And I'm like, no, you don't, because I've been there. I pretty much can finish my private clients' sentences. I've because of the suffering that I've endured for as long as I've endured it, I have the ability to speak. And I've done this on my private sessions so many times, because, you know, when you get to that point when you're in PMDD and you can't even speak to your partner because it's like, you know, the words aren't even there. Like, not only do you have brain fog, you may have anger at the time, you may have frustration, you may feel so many things and you're so overwhelmed and you don't have the words to say. I've been able to intercede and speak on the PMDD sufferer, or the ones who's suffering with PMDD, on their behalf, and to pretty much talk to their PMDD partner and say, this is what she's going through. This is what you need to do as her partner. And this is what helps so much, is because it takes the stress off of having to articulate what needs to happen when you're in a space where you literally can't. And that is the benefit of having the private sessions and being in the Breakup Proof Academy, is that you have someone that can literally speak to what you're experiencing when you can't. And the suffering that I have endured, and that I've even had hard months the entire time that I've been getting my doctorate, there have been so many months where I've had similar moments, but none to that extreme. None to that extreme as that night. And I can envision it right now and probably start bawling, crying here, because I'm like, if we're like 1 in 20 in the world that are going through that, I mean, come on. There's billions of people. I think it's like 7 billion in the world. I had to do it. I had to dedicate my doctorate to PMDD. I am so honored and privileged to serve PMDD partners, to help you escape that relationship stress that you have been feeling, to release that heaviness, to reduce your suffering with PMDD. I've never said I'm coming on here with a cure for PMDD. I've actually researched it. It's not a thing. So careful, what you try. I know we're all out here on a journey of experimenting. And so I know a lot of you ask, what do you take? What do you take? I don't take anything. I have a holistic approach. Of course, I've tried things. I think the only things of course, I've tried things. I've tried all the things, actually, except for the illegal things. I can't do mushrooms or, what is it? I can't do weed, marijuana, because I'm in the military. So anything illegal, like for the government, I've not tried, because I can't. But I've tried everything that's legal, and none of it has over-the-counter prescription. Like, it is dulled it, but there's always there's a flip side to it. There's always, how like you hear those commercials with the side effects and they're like, oh, blah, 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 death. Like, I always get the side effects from all the stuff. So I'm like, okay, that's my lot in life. So I take a holistic approach. I do lifestyle changes. I suffer too. Right. So I want you to know that. My private clients know that. Everyone in the Breakup Proof Academy knows that, because I'm very open with it. And that's why I want you to join. That's why you need to join the Breakup Proof Academy. This is a safe place for you and your partner. It is the check-in on a weekly basis that you never knew you needed. There are so many things that come out in these training sessions, these live Q&As with PMDD partners that I know, because I've been in your situation, I know that if we've not been on that training, if you've not had that time, if you've not been on that private session, you would 100% be arguing before the week is over. And what I say to you is, if you know that there's something out there that is going to reduce the stress that you experience within your PMDD relationship, which we know exacerbates your symptoms, why would you not join? I didn't have this opportunity to join anything because it didn't exist. Because if I was a part of the academy when I was in that dark place, I would have reached out to other PMDD partners. It's not just about reaching out to individuals that have PMDD. It is reaching out to individuals that have a PMDD relationship, because I would say the bulk of my stress and overwhelm and all the things with PMDD is surrounded by my relationship. Do I have the other physical symptoms and mental symptoms? Absolutely. But without relationship stress, I can pretty much, it's like a walk in the park. I can handle it. I've developed a high tolerance for physical pain, obviously being in the military. But then also just going through so many years, like this is over 17 years of having PMDD. But my relationship was the only thing that would bring me to my knees, that would be like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So this is my journey from diagnosis to doctor, the 6 years. I will be writing the book, but as of right now, I just wanted you to understand where I am coming from, behind the scenes of who I am as your PMDD psychotraumatologist. And I know that term, PMDD relationship psychotraumatologist, I know that term, a lot of people don't know what that is. And it is basically the basis of my doctorate is in traumatology, is in trauma. And the psychotraumatology is the psychological aspect of trauma. So not specifically dealing with the physical aspect of trauma where we're talking about limbs are broken and things like that, the psychological aspect. And when you add PMDD and relationship to it, that's how it's all combined together. So I want you to be very clear on my practice and what I do. PMDD, obviously, you understand relationship, you understand psychotraumatology, right? So you know how you have the psychologists that are dealing with your psychology, your mind. Okay, so we're adding trauma to this because PMDD, hello, traumatic on a monthly basis. Don't get me into that. Yeah, so that is what I specialize in. That is what my doctorate is in. That is solely what it is. So I'm not a practitioner that has gotten their doctorate and obviously trying to learn about PMDD after the fact and is trying to serve you. I've known about this for a very long time and I researched it and I've done my dissertation on it. So I want you to just feel safe in the quality of what is going to be provided, not only in the private sessions with me, but also the Breaker Proof Academy. Get in there. I have workbooks that are based off of research every single week that are being given to you. And we are working through everything, right? We're really learning how to get through PMDD without that relationship stress, without that emotional stress of this other human, right? And so my PMDD partner also, he has his master's in counseling as well. So he comes on quite frequently. He's been on and then he's been on the podcast before, but it's all aligned, right? We're both here to serve you and your PMDD partner. And if you're waiting for your PMDD partners to join and they're just in that place of, oh, I'm not ready, or I don't know about that, you join. Because I have so many private clients where I'm just meeting with them one-on-one and their relationship is being transformed because they've taken the first step. I need you to take the first step. I need you to do something different. I need you to decide. So for the month of August, I do have my promo code, which is Dr. Rose, DRROSE. And my dog needs to go on a walk, so I'm going to go soon. But yeah, I have the code Dr. Rose, which is giving you a discount off of your first month. But the value that is provided in there, my goodness, the value that is provided being in the academy is you're only paying as a member of the academy, only paying $99 a month for 4 sessions, 4 training sessions, also with 4 live Q&As. So basically you have 8 things going on. That is a lot of value for just $99 for 1 month. I made it that way because I want to make it affordable for you to be able to join and get the help that you need. Because again, I wish that I had it when I was, earlier in my journey, and especially in 2020, 2021, I really could have used that. But yes, until next time, join the academy and join me on this journey of getting the research needed out there so that you can reduce your relationship stress. Let's eliminate that. Let's take your relationship stress off the table because there are 75 other, symptoms that you have. Let's take your relationship off of there. So until next time, I'm going to go walk my dog. We got this. I hope this PMDD episode helped you and your partner in your struggles within your relationship. And if this is something that you know that you need help with and you need further support, individualized support, make sure you're going to inlovewithpmdd.com and you're getting those private sessions to really work through what you're going through in your relationship, specifically in regards to PMDD.
And also, I want you to leave a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. What this does is it helps other PMDD sufferers and partners find this show that can help them get these free PMDD relationship tools. I remember what it felt like to not know that there were tools out there specifically for PMDD relationships. So I want to make sure that you are sharing these tools with others, share them on your social media, share them with people that you know that are also struggling in their PMDD relationships. Until next episode, this is Dr. Rose, your PMDD relationship psychotraumatologist. One more thing, I almost forgot. I now have the Fresh Start PMDD Partners Workbook. What this workbook can do is if you've had past traumatic experiences with your partner, past fights, past arguments, and they keep coming up every single month in PMDD, I created a Fresh Start Workbook so that you can deal with all of the traumatic experiences that have happened in the past in PMDD rage and all of these things so you can stop going through the same cycle again and again and again. So get that workbook. It comes with a video episode of the actual podcast that I recorded on getting a fresh start in your PMDD relationship. So you're not continuing the same cycle again and again and again. So make sure that you get that workbook. And if you need those individualized counseling sessions, you know where to go, inlovewithpmdd.com. Until next time, we got this. Love you.